You're listening to Mentoring Developers. What are some of the problems first-time people who get their first jobs? What are some of the problems they face? Because you have your own experience, but you also are involved with the community.
Sure. So I think some of the most common issues are that, and this may be an age issue as well, because so I'm actually grown up, like as I mentioned, after college, I worked for 10 years before I started this. So I've been in the professional workforce for a while, though some of the people that I'm talking to, or many of them who are kind of in their first tech jobs, tend to be much younger than myself. So I think there's an initial kind of resistance or befuddlement at why nobody wants to change, why they insist on doing things a certain way or using a particular technology if it's not the best fit. So there's definitely that, but I guess that's just true of any, field. But yeah, I think that there's definitely like an old guard, I'd say, who tend to be mostly white males, and they have a clique, and it's hard to get into that clique unless you remind them of them when they were your age, I guess. So that's kind of a common thing that I hear is it's hard to find mentorship. It's hard to find someone to help you. It's hard to find camaraderie with the old guard sometimes. Also getting paid. I mean, there are, unfortunately, I've seen some software development jobs here in Austin where they're actually, I don't understand why somebody would be paid in the 30s or the 40s to do software when you can probably make more money than that waiting tables in this town.
So you're talking about $30,000 or $40,000 a year salaries for full-time software engineers. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how much experience you have or if you have no experience. In the U.S. in 2016, you cannot pay people $30,000 or $40,000. And I think we should talk more openly about salaries because a lot of new people coming into the field, even people who have been here for a while, they don't really know how much they're worth. And they're just happy to get an offer and they'll take it. And they don't know how to negotiate. And not only that, when it comes time for their yearly reviews, they don't really know how to negotiate a better salary, and then they're taken advantage of. I mean, you can't live in any mid-sized or large city in America in that kind of an income. But you're living as a student. That's shocking, but that's prevalent, and I've seen it over and over.
Absolutely. So I'd say, it's hard to find mentorship or acceptance or camaraderie or whatever you want to call that, which makes it hard to move up and get better. Then there's, I think the gender component. I know several women who've kind of work or have worked in situations where, again, it's all men. And so all these things get said or insinuated. There are activities that the men will do and they just don't include you. Like, I don't think that they're often being bad people, but they're just not thinking, hey, maybe I should be more inclusive. Because they're just so used to working with men all the time. They're just in their, modus operandi. They don't stop and think about it. And then, there's some, I know I'm not the only one, but, there's some times where they'll say things like maybe they're joking because it's like a boys club. And so they'll make, a joke about Mexicans or a joke about Indians or whatever. And you're just thinking to yourself, like, what? Why is this happening to me? So those things happen. So the money thing is also another issue. But yeah, I think that more than anything, I guess the way I would describe it is first timers kind of end up feeling kind of stuck. They're stuck, technologically because they're not working with technology necessarily that they love. They're stuck professionally because they can't find people to help them move forward. And they're stuck culturally because they're not, I guess millennials, if we're talking about that generation of which I am a part, although I am on the cusp. So, they're supposedly the most diverse generation that the United States has ever produced. And I think that they have supposedly, according to surveys, more open attitudes towards diversity than their previous cohorts. So, they kind of get stuck culturally there as well. That being said, what I kind of tell, I talk to college age students, I talk to different groups, everything from boot camp graduates to college students to high school students to middle school students and some of the work that I do. And what I do tell them is like, look, I worked in the media for 10 years, and you know what? There were problems there too. And there was sexism there too. And there was racism there too. So what I will say about tech is that's great. And including with my previous job, my first job, which I left after just under 11 months, there were great things about it. Like it put me in a position financially to where I could help my family, or, certain members of my family. I could funnel money to them. I could help them with this. I could help them with that. I could take out, boot camp grads for dinner and talk to them, and it wasn't like a financial burden for me to treat them to dinner or whatever. Like it allowed me to buy, to fix my car, like without worrying about it. So, having that kind of financial stability, it will help you have a better life. That being said, obviously you still have things to deal with. The other thing about technology, which I think is, as a career, which is really great, is what I tell people is it gives you the freedom to kind of, after you accrue a certain amount of experience, to pursue things you actually want to be doing, which isn't necessarily the case. And, I will say in media, you're always kind of held hostage to whatever opportunities are available. And who do you know who's going to put you at the front of the line for those opportunities? So there are other industries where, like any industry is going to have these types of problems. That's just the nature of corporate. But what can you do once you're there? Like, can you move away? Can you move up? Can you say, hey, I want to, in my free time, study Ember and become an Ember expert and then get a job doing Ember, right? You can't do that necessarily in other fields. And so that's something that I think is good. So, regarding my first job, I thought it was great, financially. I thought it was great to get the experience. I did learn a lot. I did meet some people who could help me. It helped me figure out what I did like and didn't like about technology, right? And it definitely helped me get my foot in the door and, kind of helped steer me towards what I did want. It's actually kind of funny. After a few months at this position, I had written a list of the things that I wanted in my next job. So I was able to more pointedly search for my next position. So that's the thing. I still do have people that I met at my first job that are now professional and personal acquaintances that I'm sure are going to come back around, especially because Austin isn't a huge metro area. So I'm sure we'll run into each other professionally again. So that's good. Some of the bad things were that as I mentioned, I did hear some less than appropriate. I did hear, more than I had cared to experience and more than I had previously experienced in other positions, inappropriate workplace things. Whether it was like, and that's the thing is like I worked in the media, which is also male dominated. So it's not like have a super soft skin or anything. But at the same time, like I did hear some things that I thought were inappropriate. I think more than anything, the things that bothered me were the implicit things. So, when people tell racist jokes to my face, that makes me very uncomfortable. When people make assumptions or illusions about a particular group of people, in this case, Indians or Chinese, that makes me uncomfortable. But when, someone who may not be straight is around and you use all these kind of like code words about being sweet, it just kind of bothers me because you're bothered by it. Why are you bothered by this person? Things like that really kind of, I didn't think were appropriate. And honestly, that's not what I think is, in a business sense, having that attitude and fomenting attitudes like that isn't going to allow you to be successful in the long term. So those were kind of some of the things. But I think overall, I take the experience I've had in technology as a primer, if you will, for like, okay, I had this media experience and I kind of have a very deep understanding of how that business works and how business works within that field. And so now I have this other experience and I have, the maturity to understand what's happening at a different level so I can cherry pick and understand, what is the business of tech like. So so that's what I would say were the good and the highlights of my first job.
Yeah, well, that's great because you bring up some really good points. One is that there are people in our industry, and unfortunately a lot of us, that we're not sensitive to other people's feelings. So it comes back to empathy that I talk about a lot in this podcast. It's very hard to have empathy if you don't see the person for who they are and you're thinking, oh, I've always done this. I've always joked around. I don't mean it. I'm not a bad person. I don't hate them. You can say all these things and maybe you don't, and maybe you are a great person. but what you say affects other people.
Mm-hmm.
And when it affects other people, you need to watch it. Now, you can do what you want in your own house. It's okay. You can hold your views and act according to your views when you're not affecting other people. But in a professional environment, it shouldn't happen. But unfortunately, it does happen because we're all human and there are no code of conduct. Even if you had code of conduct, how do you implement it? Then you need to have this regimented, a high-handed approach. You need to fire people. That's not a great outcome either. So what we need to do is, I think, we just raise awareness and hope that people are good people. And once they know that they are doing something wrong or affecting somebody negatively, then they will stop. But you know what? What we do wrong in our country, in this industry, is we put the onus on the victim to do it.
Yeah.
So if you're the victim, if you're offended, now go complain. Now they're going to address this particular complaint in isolation. So then you have to prove that you have been offended. First of all, you have to relive that experience. But secondly, it doesn't help the next person because the next person has to go through the same thing again. What we need is a system. We can say that we don't do this type of thing to anybody. And then it stops for everybody, for me and for the person that's going to be hired next. This one-on-one, prove you're a victim or you're a baby, that kind of mentality is prevalent, unfortunately. Yeah. And unfortunately, I hear it in a lot of podcasts. And a lot of other smart people have said that, they say that in respect to racism, they say that in respect to sexism and all the other types of, we want our industry to be welcoming, to just welcome everybody. You don't have to like them. You don't have to like how they act, and you don't have to agree with them, but we should all be able to work together. And that's what we were trying to promote.
Well, to your point, and this is the thing that I think gets me is, as you said, that the onus of this is put on you as a woman or you as a minority, whatever minority means in that context, right? And it's like, why are you, they're saying that you're being too sensitive, that you're the problem. But let's take a step back here. Like, I'm not raising a big flag about diversity. I'm just asking why we're talking about this. And you're the one turning it into a huge deal. So I think you're the one that's being too sensitive, bro. Like, oftentimes, like, if it's a matter of sensitivity, I think that they're the ones, because they're so afraid of being called racist or sexist, where it's like, no, I don't think you're racist. I just think you have a higher tolerance for racist things. Or I don't think that you are a walking embodiment of sexism, because I know you have daughters and I know you want the best for them. I think that you don't know how to behave around women in a professional context because you're not used to it. You know what I mean? Like, you can't even have that conversation because they're like, whoa, they freak out because they're sensitive, right? So that's what I. Yeah.
So that's one of the problems that you face. The other one that you face is that generally you don't get a good salary, and it's okay, but it's that you should be able to get more, and some of the other issues. Thank you so much for listening.
For show notes and transcripts, visit us at mentoringdevelopers.com.